The afternoon sun filtered through the sheer curtains of Willowbrook Care Center, casting gentle shadows across the polished floors. Margaret wiped her hands on her uniform and checked her watch. 3:30. Time for her rounds with the residents, who needed a little extra attention. At 62, Margaret had been caring for others most of her adult life. First her own mother, then her husband during his final years, and now these dear souls who had become like family to her. Her graying hair was always pulled back in a neat bun, and her kind eyes held the patience that only comes from understanding life's fragility. She knocked softly on room 14B before entering. "Good afternoon, Henry," she said warmly. "How are we feeling today?" Henry Patterson sat in his wheelchair by the window, his weathered hands folded in his lap. At 87, he had been a resident for nearly 2 years, ever since the stroke that left him unable to speak clearly or care for himself. His son visited occasionally, but Henry often seemed lost in his own world, staring out at the garden where the roses were beginning to bloom. Henry struggled with the words, pointing toward the window. "The roses?" Margaret asked, gently, pulling up a chair beside him. "Yes, they're beautiful this year, aren't they? Your favorites are the yellow ones, I remember." Henry nodded, his eyes brightening slightly. Margaret had learned to read his expressions, to understand what he needed even when the words wouldn't come. She adjusted his blanket and checked his water glass, making sure he was comfortable. "Would you like me to read to you today?" she asked. "I brought that book about the lighthouse keeper we started last week." But Henry shook his head, looking troubled. He pointed to his chest, then to his throat, making a frustrated sound. Margaret leaned closer, studying his face. "Are you thinking about something from long ago?" she asked softly. Henry's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded. Margaret had seen this before, the way memories could surface suddenly, bringing both joy and sorrow. She reached over and took his hand. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "when my mind is full of thoughts I can't quite express, I find it helps to hear an old song. Would you like that?" Henry squeezed her hand, and Margaret began to hum softly. It was an old melody, one her grandmother had sung to her years ago. The tune was simple and sweet, about finding peace in simple moments. As she hummed, she noticed Henry's shoulders relaxing. "My grandmother used to sing this to me," Margaret said, her voice barely above a whisper. She said music could say things when words weren't enough. Henry's eyes were closed now, and a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Margaret continued to hum, then began to sing the words softly. In the quiet of the evening. When the world has settled down, there's a peace that comes from knowing you're not alone. Every moment has its meaning. Every heart its sacred ground. And the love we give comes back to make us whole. She had learned the song from her grandmother, who had learned it from hers. It wasn't a famous song, just something passed down through generations of women who understood that sometimes the most powerful medicine was simply being present with someone in their pain. What Margaret didn't know was that someone was listening. From the doorway, David Patterson stood quietly in the hall, his expensive suit and polished shoes a stark contrast to the humble he had come to discuss his father's care with the staff, to handle the practical matters that needed attention. But when he heard the gentle singing, he stopped. David was a successful businessman, worth millions from his tech company. He prided himself on efficiency, on solving problems quickly and moving on. But listening to this woman sing to his father, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The song reminded him of his mother, who had died when he was young, and of Sunday mornings when his father would make pancakes while she hummed in the kitchen. He watched as Margaret finished the song and simply sat with Henry, holding his hand. His father looked more peaceful than David had seen him in months. When had he last just sat with his father without checking his phone or thinking about the next meeting? Margaret began to speak softly about the weather, about the flowers blooming outside, about small things that somehow seemed important in the quiet of the room. David realized he was witnessing something rare, pure, uncomplicated kindness. Henry, Margaret was saying, I think tomorrow might be a good day to sit outside. The weather's supposed to be lovely, and I know how much you enjoy watching the birds. Henry nodded, still holding her hand. David could see tears in his father's eyes, but they seemed to be tears of gratitude rather than sadness. Margaret stayed with Henry for another 20 minutes, not doing anything medical or necessary, just being present. When she finally stood to leave, she patted his shoulder gently. I'll see you tomorrow, dear, she said, and maybe we'll have another song then. As Margaret turned to leave, she was surprised to find a man in the doorway. David stepped forward, and she recognized him immediately from the family photos on Henry's nightstand. I'm sorry, she said, suddenly self-conscious. I didn't realize you were here. I was just please, David said quietly. Don't apologize. I'm David, Henry's son. I heard you singing. Margaret nodded, unsure what to say. She had met David briefly during previous visits, but they had never really talked. That was beautiful, David continued. I haven't seen my father that peaceful in a very long time. He's a wonderful man. He just needs someone to listen. David looked back at his father, who was now dozing in his wheelchair, the afternoon sun warming his face. How often do you spend time with him like this? Every day, Margaret replied. Sometimes he needs help with practical things, but mostly he just needs company. We all do. David was quiet for a moment, processing what he had witnessed. The song you sang. Where did you learn it? Margaret smiled. My grandmother taught it to me. She said there were some songs that could heal hearts, and some that could heal souls. That one always seemed to do both. Would you? David hesitated, then continued. Would you teach it to me? Margaret looked surprised. Of course, but may I ask why? Because I want to sing it to him, David said simply. I want to give him what you just gave him. Over the next few days, David found himself staying longer during his visits. Margaret would teach him the song, and they would talk about his father's younger days, about the man Henry had been before the stroke. David learned that his father had been a talented pianist, that he had loved jazz music, that he had taught himself to play guitar as a young man. I never knew that. David admitted one afternoon as they sat with Henry in the garden, there's so much about him I never knew. It's never too late to learn, Margaret said gently. And it's never too late to share what you know about yourself either. David began visiting his father every day, bringing photos and stories, playing music from Henry's youth. And yes, he learned to sing the song Margaret had taught him. His voice wasn't as sweet as hers, but Henry's face would light up every time he heard it. As the weeks passed, David found himself talking to Margaret more about life, about the things that truly mattered. She had a wisdom that came from years of caring for others, from understanding that success wasn't measured in bank accounts, but in moments of connection. David said one evening as they walked out of the care center together, I've been thinking about something. What's that? Margaret asked. I've been successful in business, but I've never done anything that really mattered. Not like what you do. Margaret stopped walking and looked at him. What you're doing now matters, being here for your father. That matters more than you know. But I want to do more, David said. I want to help places like this, people like you, who are doing the real work of caring for others. And so began a partnership that would change both their lives. David used his resources to improve the care center, to hire more staff, to create programs that brought music and art to the residents. But more importantly, he learned to slow down, to be present, to understand that the most valuable thing he could give was his time. Margaret continued to sing to Henry and to the other residents, who needed a gentle voice and a caring heart. But now she also helped David understand how to turn his success into something meaningful, how to use his gifts to lift others up. The song that had started it all became a bridge between two very different people, showing them that kindness, when witnessed and shared, has the power to change everything. Henry passed away peacefully the following spring, with David holding one hand and Margaret holding the other, and in that moment they sang the old song together, letting its gentle melody carry their love and their grief, their gratitude for having known such a good man. The song lived on. Passed from Margaret to David, from David to others who needed to remember that the most important things in life cannot be bought or sold, only given freely from one heart to another.